My name is Hope Warren, and my pronouns are she, they, or if that's complicated, just call me by my name. I'm deeply honored that the chair in Transgender Studies has given me the opportunity to share with you today. That's not the right slide. Both those of you here in person and those joining online. But more than that, I am very grateful that we actually have a space like this, because the truth is so much of trans plus history has had to survive outside of spaces like this. Oral history has always been central to our survival, still the wrong slide. The stories we pass down, the knowledge we share with each other, this is how we have persisted over time. There are so few places in the world where we can access the history of those who came before us, and yet that history is vital. Our community faces homelessness at disproportionately high rates, and when our unhoused comrades are forced to move, when they lose what little they have, where does their history go? How many generations of stories have been lost because our people have been pushed to the margins for so long? And even when we do record our history, it's not safe. Our books are banned and burned when governments shift to the right. It can feel as if the world is trying to erase us by erasing our history. But there are places, like the Transgender Archives here at UVic, where people both cis and trans are working to preserve what is so often taken from us. Today, I want to share with you an oral history, not just my own, but the histories that have been entrusted to me, the stories that have shaped me, and the images that I drew in response. This piece is called Angels in the Rain. Next slide. Under a lone street lamp, a feminine figure stands, her body dissolving into the rain that pours around her. Her silhouette is shadowed, undefined, almost merging with the storm. Yet there's a quiet strength in her presence, a refusal to disappear. Behind her, wings stretch outward, but they aren't the grand divine kind. They're fractured, ghostly, almost an impression left behind by light and water. They don't lift her, they weigh on her, a reminder of what she carries. These wings aren't about escape, they're about survival. This piece is especially personal to me. I learned the value of oral history while working alongside outdoor service providers, women who had spent years, some decades, navigating life on the street, women who shared their wisdom and their survival tactics with each other and with me. Many of them didn't see me as a woman like themselves, but they still recognized I faced the same dangers, the same risks, and so they shared. They taught me ways to stay safe, to be prepared, and it was humbling to listen to their stories, to realize that even in rejection, there was still care. Angels in the Rain is about that complexity, the duality of exclusion and protection, of danger and resilience. It speaks to those who exist in spaces that are overlooked, those who move between visibility and erasure. This angel doesn't stand beneath the street lamp to ascend, she stands to endure. And so we must endure and share our stories with each other. Next slide, please. This piece is called From Whence We Came. It depicts two figures, one smaller, cowering on the ground, and the other massive and looming over it. The two are connected, their bodies still entwined, as if one has been torn from the other. Entrails stretch from the back of the smaller figure and the chest of the larger, making it unclear which body was born from which. And this ambiguity is intentional. The figures mirror each other in posture, their hands positioned in opposite ways. It lets us ask, who came from who? Is the larger figure a manifestation of pain, looming, inescapable, or is it something protective, rising from suffering itself? This image reminds me that my wounds, they often feel bigger than I am, that despair can feel larger than my ability to hold it, and it asks, am I more than the pain I feel at my lowest? And why does my suffering feel so inextricably woven into my body, my mind, and my history? And for this story, that history begins on March 2021. I had spent my entire transition in the trades working towards my red seal as a carpenter. Despite 5 years on HRT at the time, I was still stronger than many of my peers, regardless of their gender, and that meant I was expected to carry more. I took immense pride in my ability to rise to the demands of the work, but the physical toll was relentless, and eventually it was too much. I aggravated my neck so severely that returning to work became impossible. There was never a separation between gender and sex to my employers. And then suddenly it was over. My identity as a trans woman disappeared overnight. Chronic pain remained, a constant reminder of what I'd lost, and the summer of 2023, opioids became my escape. And addiction followed quickly. By November, I was overdosing, alone. I was ashamed. I was ashamed that I was using. ashamed that I was overdosing, ashamed that I had let my pain consume me. The image captures that battle, the war between self and suffering, between survival and surrender. It asks, am I separate from my pain, or am I forever bound to it? Next slide, please. This piece is called Give Me Slumber. Nope, I'm back. The figure reaches towards the wraith, and in return, the wraith extends its long, bony hand, cradling the smaller form. But the wraith itself is unstable, dissolving into wisps of smoke, unraveling at the edges. There was no intention to become addicted to opioids. It happened quickly and quietly. I felt disconnected from the world, and one day I woke up and realized I was no longer living my life for myself. I was working for my addiction. Several months after my addiction took hold, a close friend took me to the Rapid Access Addiction Clinic, RAC, here in Victoria. RAC specializes in opioid use disorder, helping people stabilize through opioid agonist treatment. And for those unfamiliar, this isn't about keeping people on opioids indefinitely, not at all. Clinics like RAC provide a short-term controlled supply of pharmaceutical opioids to transition people onto safer alternatives like Suboxone, Methadone, and Subutex. And every time I hear about restrictions on safe supply, I get irritated because there is so much misinformation about this. No one is out here trying to score harm reduction supplies. These are harm reduction drugs that are designed to preserve life, to stabilize people off opioids so they can actually begin recovery. There isn't an epidemic of people overdosing on harm reduction supplies, but there is an epidemic of people overdosing on unregulated street supply. Stabilization is just one part of the process. Without proper mental health supports afterwards, relapse is common. The struggle doesn't end the moment the drugs leave your system. Connection is what saves people. Nearly a year into addiction, I was able to step into treatment, into potential recovery. I was privileged enough to access full wraparound services here on the island, and this piece reminds me of how addiction felt. It was something that held me. It wrapped itself around me. Something at times even felt like comfort. But what feels like comfort in the moment can slowly erase you. The wraith in this image, was it holding me together, or was it pulling me apart? Next slide, please. This piece is called The Many-Eyed Raven. The creature in this image stands with its tattered wings spread wide, its form dissolving into jagged, frayed edges. Its body is covered in staring eyes, unblinking and scattered across its wings, its chest, its outstretched limbs. 3 heads rise from its form, beaks open mid-scream as if caught in a state of constant alarm. The raven looks monstrous, wise, tormented. Its presence is overwhelming. I went to a treatment center that specialized in concurrent mental health issues, addiction and trauma, and you'd think that would mean stability. That finally receiving the support I needed would make things easier, but the truth is, the more I worked through the layers of trauma that led me to addiction, the more dysregulated I became. The facility used a combination of dialectical behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and cognitive processing therapy, along psych education, group therapy, and individualized care. I lived there for nearly 10 weeks. I had a dedicated physician, a counselor, structured meals, and extracurricular activities. And on paper, everything was in place. But trauma doesn't unravel neatly. Healing doesn't follow a clean, predictable path. My sleep started slipping away, first a few restless nights, then whole weeks where I was only sleeping an hour or 2 at a time. My body was vibrating with exhaustion, my mind racing, teetering between hyper-awareness and total depletion. And that's when I started noticing how my healthcare team responded to my distress compared to my cis counterparts. It became clear to me that the staff had limited training around trans plus issues. And it was obvious that my lack of sleep was deteriorating my mental state, but the medical interventions I needed weren't scaling to match how quickly I was declining. I felt as if I was being treated according to my size, my voice, assessed through assumptions rather than understanding. Even there in this world-class facility, I was confronted with the limitations of trans healthcare. After 9.5 weeks, my attending physician made the call to send me to Psychiatric Emergency Services, or PES, where I would spend 2 more weeks sleeping and eating in a large rectangular room, seeing a psychiatrist twice daily, adjusting my medications, stabilizing my system, and finally getting some sleep. The Many-Eyed Raven is the embodiment of my experience in treatment and in PES. The feeling of being constantly observed, yet unseen. It's the exhaustion of continually explaining yourself, being scrutinized, categorized, yet never fully acknowledged. It is the weight of hypervisibility and invisibility all at once. Next slide, please. This piece is called The Separation of Church and State. Two figures are locked in an impossible struggle. One pushing forward, the other pulling away. Their bodies dissolve into each other. Limbs and forms unraveling into wisps, hands grasping at what was once whole. There is no clean break, no simple division. The more they separate, the more they seem to tear apart, taking pieces of one another with them. Even the great masters of art, the very foundation on how we understand the human form, have reinforced the idea of fixed, idealized male and female proportions. Take the Loomis method, for example. Next slide. Next slide. Or Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. Next slide. Or the classical sculptures that use precise measurements to define what a male or female body should look like. Next slide. And next slide, please. These artistic traditions have deeply influenced how we see gender, embedding biological essentialism into the very fabric on how we are taught to perceive bodies. And in studying these works, I've come to understand just how baked in these conceptions are. And the more I examine them, the more I realize why it's hard to untangle gender from biology, not just in art, but in medicine, in policy, in everyday interactions. It's not just an intellectual exercise. It's something that people have been taught to accept as an absolute truth. And strangely, this realization has also given me a new sense of grace when I look back at my time in treatment. The frustrations, the microaggressions, the moments of misgendering, they weren't entirely surprising. Companies and institutions often have anti-harassment policies, but how many have statements of allyship? How many actively work to understand these complexities rather than just avoid liability? This piece, like the issue itself, is about entanglement. It's about the way things have been woven together for so long that separating them feels violent and painful, like pulling against a force that doesn't want to let go. Gender and biology, art and perception, policy and lived experience, they are all interconnected. And when you try to break them apart, you see just how deep that thread runs. Next slide, please. This piece is called The Letter T. A feminine figure cradles another person in her arms, holding them close as they both dissolve into wisps of shadow and light. Their bodies seem to be unraveling at the edges, as if fading into something greater than themselves. Three hands reach out to hold the smaller figure, layered with meaning, hands of insight, compassion, and presence. And this piece is about presence, about what it means to show up for someone when they're at their lowest. It was my friend Tori that took me to RAC. She helped me to my appointments, she encouraged me to get into treatment, and visited me while I was there. And when I told her that I didn't want to be in the world anymore, she didn't lecture me, didn't try to force a solution, she just held me while I wept. Sometimes presence is enough. The three hands in this image also represent something more. The many hands of community, whether that's counselors or support groups, sports teams, coffee dates, or even parallel play, whatever form it takes. Human connection is what keeps us here. And indeed, at every interval in my journey, I did in fact find queer and trans people all along the way. We've never been more represented in the different fields of work as we are now, and it's remarkable. Gabor Mate said, "The opposite of addiction is connection." And I'm alive today because people showed up. Because people listened to my story, my history, and this piece is a reminder of that. The quiet, unwavering strength of presence. 1 minute left, I got this. So thank you. Thank you for listening to my story and my history. And thank you. I only have 1 minute left. Thank you. Maybe you can't relate to everything that I've shared today, and that's okay. But now, if you couldn't say it before, you can now say that you know someone impacted by the opioid crisis. Now this isn't a statistic or a headline. Now it's a person, a story, a history. And that's why our stories matter. This is why oral history is more important than ever in these times when every day feels like a battle, when we're forced to remain vigilant against attack, it is our shared stories, our voices that keep us connected. And in each other's presence, we find resilience, we find meaning, we find the strength to keep going. So I ask you, in whatever way you can, please stay connected, keep listening, keep showing up, because this is how we move trans history forward. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Trinity. I use they, she pronouns, and I'm talking about Halloween. Woo. Okay. Halloween is a night of exceptions. Previously strongly held cultural values can get pushed aside in the name of a fun-loving holiday. Children are encouraged to ask strangers for candy. Professionals can dress as vampires, and clothing becomes genderless in the name of a costume. This shift in social expectations in the name of Halloween has had an historic impact on the LGBT+ community, especially those whose gender expression does not fit the, quote, norm. My presentation today will argue that Halloween can and should be understood from a trans history perspective, and that this is important not only for furthering the historiography, but also our cultural understanding as a community. After placing us within the context of the historiography, I will walk you through some of my primary source collection of entries to newsletters and periodicals made in the state of New York from the mid-1980s to late 1990s that discuss Halloween in relation to the transgender and cross-dressing communities. Focusing on individual experiences of Halloween and smaller communal gatherings, these primary sources demonstrate how a culture of self-expression, accessible gender-affirming care, and trans joy started to develop. Next slide, please. Could I get a show of hands? Who has heard Halloween being referred to as gay Christmas? Okay, yeah. That's where my interest in this topic started, because that's what my cultural understanding was. But I was surprised to find a limited historiography on the topic, despite the idea's abundance within my own community, and as I will show you shortly, within the archive. The title, Gay Christmas, does point us toward one of the more specific engagements of this topic in scholarship. Professor Mark Stein, in his book, Sisterly and Brotherly Loves, regularly references the communal queer events, and especially parades, that took place in Philadelphia around the holiday, especially in the 1960s and 70s. Stein, in an NBC interview, explained that the title of Gay Christmas comes from the name Bitches Christmas. His book refers to the term being used by the gay magazine Drum in 1966. Falling in line with Stein's focus on parades, this is where we see most of the existing scholarship focusing. Both queer historians and Halloween historians have discussed this manifestation of the holiday. Halloween parades also took place in South Carolina, Toronto, San Francisco, and Greenwich Village in New York City. These parades would have influenced how the LGBT+ community understood Halloween, both as a night of expression and tension, as some of these parades had to be shut down to the prevalence of hate crimes. Additionally, Nicholas Rogers, in his book Halloween, From Pagan Ritual to Party Night, references how the queer community was influential to Halloween's shift away from a child-focused holiday. This encourages us to ask not only how has Halloween influenced queer culture, but how has queer culture influenced Halloween. Next slide, please. You might have noticed so far in my presentation, I have referred largely to Halloween from a queer or LGBT+ history perspective. This is intentional because this is what the majority of this scholarship is doing. And as I present here at the Moving Trans History Forward Conference, this is something I would like to challenge. Although the holiday might be colloquially called Gay Christmas, it has, as I will highlight in my presentation, had a substantial impact on the trans community and trans individuals in a way that is deserving of its own focus. Further, what I find to be lacking in the historiography is a focus on smaller scale events, cultural changes, and individual trans lives. These are the stories I hope to share with you today as a way of encouraging further research on the topic and more community understanding of Halloween from a trans history perspective. Next slide, please. Back one. Sorry, there we go. The nuance between self-expression and costume is central to what allows Halloween to become a safe space for trans plus people. To explore this concept, I am going to introduce you to the first primary source of this collection, featured on screen here. This is a picture from the periodical Our Special Joy, published in December 1984. The caption reads, Don't be fooled by their short skirts and masks. Underneath their bizarre outfits, they're just a couple of busboys getting into the Halloween spirit at the Studio 54 Bash. The question of whether these individuals are cis or trans, expressing their gender or wearing a costume, is part of what encapsulated into the Halloween spirit of the moment. Both those perceiving people transing gender on this holiday do not know why they are doing so. Trans people who would be in jeopardy any other day of the year can claim they are in costume. As we go through this primary source collection further, I will provide examples of how trans people use this nuance to their advantage. Next slide, please. Next, I'm going to introduce you to Donna Marie, in part because I want to present this primary source collection largely chronologically, but also because her story represents the positive potential of the holiday. Donna Marie wrote in an article published in Our Special Joy from February 1985, wherein she described her Halloween from the year before. Donna Marie lived predominantly as a man and was a husband and a father, but her wife was aware of her feminine identity. Despite this, they agreed this part of Donna Marie's life should be kept away from their children. But in October of 1984, Donna Marie's wife made the suggestion that she take the children trick-or-treating as Donna Marie. The wife's idea illustrates how Halloween was changing the public's perception of gender expression. Donna Marie writes, "I can't possibly express the inner feelings of total bliss and happiness I felt as my wife wished us luck and we headed out amongst the spooks and goblins." The removal of cultural norms allowed Donna Marie to connect with her children in a lasting way. She further describes being able to be Donna Marie around her family more, such as exhibited in the Christmas photo of her and her daughter on screen here. For Donna Marie, Halloween opened the door for communicating her identity and with her family and was a vessel for trans joy. Next slide, please. Another way that Halloween was able to facilitate trans joy and agency was by providing costumes as an excuse to buy clothing that helps one express their gender. Paul Kay, in their article in the TGIC from November of 1992, featured on screen here, outlines just this, saying, "Whether for the chance to attend a Halloween party, go out dressed, or to shop for feminine articles of clothing with a degree of honesty, Halloween is a great time of year." In an earlier article of the TGIC from March of 1988, another author named Dawn explains her experience of Halloween. Similar to Donna Marie, Dawn lived as a father and a husband, but unlike Donna Marie, was not able to reveal herself to her children. Despite this, she was able to celebrate the holiday and go out and buy gender-affirming items that she wanted, in addition to going to a Halloween party. When at a women's shoe store, the store owner told her, "You guys are all chickens. The only time most of you guys have the guts to come in here is Halloween." Regardless of their teasing, the worker was positive and encouraged Donna to wear the clothing she bought. The store worker's awareness of the trans community's connection to Halloween further illustrates its significance. At the same time, Dawn describes going to a drugstore for eyelashes and nails and being laughed at. Using Halloween as a reason to shop seemed to be common knowledge within the community, with multiple advice articles in this collection mentioning it. Next slide, please. I started this presentation by highlighting the context of Halloween parades, and we see within the primary sources here that while on a smaller, more local level, communal gatherings were still an important part of the holiday. Interestingly, we see the desire to celebrate and come together as a community had grown to the point that Halloween was no longer just on October 31st, but all month. Those planning these events were aware of that for many, these parties were a rarity, so they did their best to make them accessible. For example, they looked out for people like Dawn, who could not get ready at home, by providing space and assistance to do so at their venues. The ad on screen here is from Crossdressers International, published in October of 1992, and begins, "Here come all the crazies," or at least that's what we hope will happen. This sarcasm speaks to the awareness of how their community was being perceived, but an ownership and a pride in that. Regardless of how they were seen by outsiders any other month of the year, Halloween was distinctly their time to be authentic. Next slide. Throughout this presentation, I have focused largely on moments of trans joy and trans agency fostered by Halloween. But there is another side to this story. While this was a day that allowed trans plus people to be themselves, it could also just be that, a single day. In the periodical The Transgenderist, published in October of 1996, a columnist, Gina calls this out directly. To be bound by the conventional rules the rest of the year is both stifling and sad for those who feel they must abide by such restrictions. This stands as a reminder that for many, the next morning they would have to go back to passing. For example, Dawn ends her description of her Halloween reflecting on the gender euphoria she experienced when dressed up. Once the wig was on, I could only gasp with delight as the girl of my dreams was staring at me from the mirror. I hoped it would last forever, but that is just it. For her, it was likely that moment would not last. It's also important to be mindful that while this day offered some sanctuary, transphobia and homophobia was still there. In an article from the Transgenderist published in December of 1995, Callan describes her participation in a Halloween events not solely attended by the trans plus community. For example, she describes winning a women's costume prize at a party while also being misgendered by the MC all night. Callan further spoke to the newspaper Post-Star, interviewing her, yet misrepresenting what she said. She also had a conversation with an anthropologist at one of these parties about the trans community. In these moments, Callan is having a spotlight put on her within the context of the holiday, but despite people's interest in her and her transness, who she is not treated with respect. Being aware of the negative experiences and full reality of what it meant to be out on Halloween is important. It is a reminder of the limits of a single day, but also makes the trans joy and agency facilitated by this holiday all the more important. Next slide. For the conclusion of my presentation, For the conclusion of my presentation, I have brought us back to the first primary source that was shared on my first slide, a poster from a Halloween party featured in the Transgenderist, published in October of 1998. It reads, "A Transgender Halloween, a welcome event for cross-dressers, transsexuals, and drags, including those who are only transgendered one night a year." This heading shows how the community saw Halloween as theirs, and also as something to be celebrated and shared across the trans plus community. This connection between Halloween and trans plus people is what I've highlighted throughout my presentation. Being a reprieve from social expectations, Halloween created a space where the trans community could purchase gender-affirming clothes, share their identity more publicly, and celebrate together. On this spooky night, trans joy and agency flourished, even as transphobia persisted. My hope is that my presentation has called attention to how there is a history of Halloween that goes beyond large-scale events and that is worthy of understanding from a trans history perspective. Further, I ask as you leave here today that you carry with you the stories and people I have shared, Donna Marie, Dawn, Callan, and Gina, and incorporate their lives and trans joy into your celebration of Halloween. Thank you for your time.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Dallas and I are two of the four editors of this massive tome. We have no slides for you. We just have the massive tome, which is very thick. It's 794 pages long, and it is a transgender history of the United States, not a history of transgender medicine in the United States. It's focused on the development of the medical paradigm, let's put it that way. And it is not the history, it is a history. And what we wanted to do was broaden the scope of that history beyond what has historically been offered to medical and non-medical students of transgender experience. And there were four of us editors who put this together, and we had one cis person and three trans people among the editors, and the one cis person is a medical doctor. And she was the one who came up with the whole idea for doing this book. And it was because she was invited to write a short article for the Encyclopedia of Transgender Studies on transgender the history of transgender medicine. And she agreed to do it knowing that she knew nothing about the history of transgender medicine. She saw her first trans patient in 2007 and had first told the guy, it was a trans man who called her up, said he just moved to the area where she was working. It was a rural area in upstate New York. And, you know, he's now in a rural area. He's looking for medical care, and he's wondering if he can come to her clinic. And she says, well, I don't know anything about transgender medicine. I don't know that I can treat you. And he says, I can help you. I can teach you. You know, I mean, this is what we have done historically, as most of us know here. And so she agreed finally to, you know, she realized, oh, well, yeah, I mean, if this was somebody in my family, I would do some research, I would figure this out. And just because this person isn't someone that I already know, doesn't mean I can't treat them. So she learned and started and ultimately founded a rural trans clinic in upstate New York that treats thousands of patients from all over the region. And but anyway, when she agreed to do this, she didn't know anything about it. And then she got this idea to do this book, and she thought, well, I can't do this on my own. I'll ask Dallas Denny, she said to herself after having seen Dallas present something about transgender history at Fantasia Fair.
No, it was at a conference in Connecticut. It was at a conference in Connecticut. I did a surgery of genital presentation about gender reassignment surgery.
Okay. So yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, Dallas said, "Oh yeah, book, good idea. I'm a writer. I can do that." So, but we need some more people because it's a big topic. So then they found Kyan Lynch, who's a young trans man, MD, who is very, very smart. And he works in educational stuff in a hospital, He does educational work of medical people in a hospital setting. And he also is very, very capable with respect to anything digital and computers and all that kind of jazz, and can build websites and things like that. And they thought, we need a website for this book. And we need, so we can find people to contribute chapters to the book. So they built a website, the three of them, mostly Kyan, and advertised for people to contribute. And among the contributors, they got Dr. Aaron DeVore to write the chapter on Reed Erickson, and they got me to write a chapter on the medical associations and the standards of care. And a couple of years go by. I hadn't done anything, didn't hear anything from them. What year did you start doing this?
It was an 8-year project.
It was, yeah, it was an 8-year project. I'm not good at math, but 6 years ago, so that would be 2019, I get a phone call and they say, would you be the 4th editor on our book? Because we need to move this along. And I said, okay, because that'll get me busy. And so this project took 8 total years of development with all the different, there are 43 contributing writers, and the 4 of us editors are among those 43 contributing writers. And we debated about so many topics as we worked on this. And we helped a lot of our contributing writers in the problems that they faced as they were writing about this. And a lot of it has to do with how we translate people who existed in the past into a context that people now can understand. How do we talk about somebody's identity when they never talked about their identity? what pronouns do we use when they never declared their pronouns? Can we talk about them, about what they experienced prior to announcing themselves in whatever way they did as trans? It's very, very tricky. And we held a bunch of focus groups with people in different parts of the country and said, what should we do? And they all debated, and ultimately they ended up saying, look, somebody's going to be mad at you at some point, and you can't get it right. You can't do anything that's going to actually meet everybody's needs. Just tell the truth. Just tell the truth. And so that's what we tried to do. And we had no idea that this book would come out 12 days after the Trump inauguration. And now we have to promote it. Now we have to put ourselves out there and say, this is an important book that we think you'll learn something from, when people are saying, we don't want to learn anything about this. We don't want to do anything about this. And yet, I was able to, all the other three editors, I'm on the West Coast, everybody else is on the East Coast. And so I organized a book reading event in a bookstore. It was held on February 28th. And 50 people came to that reading, which was unheard of. And in fact, that bookstore has never held an event larger than that. In fact, they've only held one other event that got that many attendees. And I was really happy because people brought copies of the book that they had pre-ordered so that I could sign them there. And because the bookstore only ordered 3 copies. And then they took orders after the talk. I talked for 2 hours. And I had another trans man there who works with children in public schools, and he was the one he asked me the questions, and we had dialogue about it. It was very, very fun. But when the bookstore owner tried to put an ad, a paid ad, on Facebook in the bookstore's own account about the event of the reading, they rejected the ad. They said, no, this violates our policies because it's going to present something that maybe it's a sensitive topic that can upset people and might influence people in the way that they vote. What? I mean, yeah, they rejected the ad. It's designed, they said it's designed to influence how people might think. Well, yeah, isn't that what education does? Give me a break. So the bookstore owner asked everybody in the bookstore if they would like to raise the middle finger to Facebook in a photograph. And so everybody raised the middle finger to Facebook in the photograph, and she sent it to Facebook, to Meta, the Meta policy. So anyway, we don't know what happened with that. But you talk.
Okay. First, fucks up. You know, fucks up. That was just uncalled for. The first author, I don't think you mentioned her name, Carolyn Wolfe Gould, and I guarantee you she is totally up to snuff now on trans issues. She was the team leader, and I don't think we would have finished it, but it was an immense amount of work. We met weekly via Zoom. We did a tremendous amount of writing ourselves, and we did a tremendous amount of editing, and then we had to do the index, which is just kind of a nightmare project, and then we had to help with the publicity, which is still ongoing. And it's published by Oxford Press. No. Sorry, SUNY Press, I'm sorry. I was looking at another book the other day. It's published by SUNY Press, and neither SUNY nor we planned for this to break just as a new horrible administration took over in Washington, D.C. Things were developing as we wrote, and we kept having to add things as the situation deteriorated on the ground. We finally had to say, okay, we have to find a stop point, because we could still be documenting what's happened, and I hope someone is documenting what's happened, but we were very sensitive. We wanted to have a lot of trans representation in this book, and 3 of the editors are trans, but we also profiled all kinds of trans people because they actually brought their own medical treatment, if they got medical treatment, or their own transitions, or their own figuring out in themselves. They were the team leaders for themselves as they did that, and they often enlisted the help of cisgender physicians and other professionals to help them and provide medical treatment that they needed. So there's a wide representation of people historically. Also, although the book is a history of trans medicine in the United States, we wanted to recognize that what was going on in Europe with sexologists, with the gender clinic in Germany and Berlin of Magnus Hirschfeld, we wanted to sort of trace how that migrated over the Atlantic Ocean to the United States. And but we ran into a lot of questions, as James talked about, is do we dead name people? And what do we call someone when there were no terms of the time? We can't call them transgender. That wasn't even a term when they were alive, and they probably wouldn't recognize it if they were alive to hear it. And what pronouns do we use? In some cases, we knew pronouns. In some cases, we didn't know pronouns. We took this to the focus groups. We did one at Fantasia Fair in Provincetown, and we did one online. And we talked about our concerns, and they said, just do it no matter what you decide. People will be upset about it. So, yeah, that's what we did. So we talked about not using pronouns before a transition for people who transition, and they said, well, most of our focus groups were saying, that's depriving them of part of their history. So they advised us to use the names that they actually used at the times that they actually used them. So we talked about people before transition with their birth pronouns and then their chosen pronouns except for Christine Jorgensen, and we just didn't feel right about using ever any male pronouns to describe Christine Jorgensen. So she was an exception. But this was a learning process for us about terminology, about naming, about pronouns, about being sensitive to all kinds of places where the trans patients of the time were coming, and to also honor the cisgender people who worked with us, often at risk to their own careers. I just read a bio of Harry Benjamin, and he got a ration of shit for his work with trans people. But it was a learning process for us all, and for better or worse, here's the book. It's about $34 at Amazon, and
it's $44.95 list price.
And you'll have to sell your car to get a hard copy. But we're proud of it. We're happy it's getting a good reception so far, and so far the radical right does not seem to have it on their radar.
So far.